I'm convening this session together with some of my colleagues from the Wyss Academy's regional hubs, and we want to focus on sustainability transformations in protected area buffer zones. That thing doesn't seem to be working. Okay, slowly. All right, so why buffer zones? We really think these buffer zones, they are actually quite crucial because on the one hand, they are somehow the spaces where a lot of action can happen that also benefits people living in nearby protected areas. On the other hand, if these actions maybe are not really thought through deep enough, then it could also happen that spillover effects occur that in the end hamper the conservation effects that the protected areas themselves have. And so we want to talk more about possibilities of transformative interventions in these buffer zones this afternoon. We have a mix of implementation and research-oriented sessions, and I'm especially happy that we have Gabriela Zambrano with us this afternoon. She's actually a practitioner and change agent in the Tambopata Natural Reserve buffer zone in the Peruvian Amazon herself, and I think it will make a very nice closing to our session. With that, I would like to invite our first speaker, Eycan.
Thanks, Julie. So, while we are waiting for the presentation, my name is Eycan. I'm a PhD candidate from the Wyss Academy of Nature at the University of Bern. Can you please go back one slide back? No. Seems not to be working. Okay, so the topic of my presentation is management of the buffer zone as a Nambe National Park as the case study for the research. So this is the outline of my presentation. Could you please move to the next slide? So the Nambe National Park is the largest national park in Laos, which is located in the northern highlands of Laos. It approximately covers about 500,000 kilometers square. So it was originally started as a national protected area in 1993, but then promoted to one of the first national park in 2019. It's also like it's the largest national park, but also the governance model of the national park is supposed to be replicable to other national park in Laopedia. There's basically two zones in the national park. One is totally protected area, which is about 300,000 kilometers, and this other one is kind of like a buffer zone, which is called control use zone, where most of the land uses are happening. Could you please move again? So the main livelihoods in land users in the buffer zones or in the Nambe National Park landscape are the shifting cultivation, which is mainly to produce upland rice, and then there are also all sorts of cash crops. Basically, the mains are the maize, cassava, job steers, and also cattle is also a huge industry, and which is becoming more and more important for the income generation activities. And also there are paddy fields. Apart from that, the local communities, they also rely a lot on NTFP collections, not only for consumption, but also for commercial purposes as well. And then the hunting mainly for consumption now. And also there's this ecotourism program, which is initiated by the National Park as part of an alternative livelihood program. Could you please go next? Next. So for this study, we applied the telecoupling framework. So there's a sending system, a receiving system, and a spillover system. And then we proposed that the sending and receiving system, they not only have create spillover system, but also have multiplier effects, resulting in the emergence of new telecouple sending system. For our research, we defined the sending system A as the network of conservation and development organizations which are working in the Nambe National Park landscape. And for the system B, we define Nambe National Park core zone and its governance structure. And the system C, which is spillover system for the A and B, but at the same time, the receiving system for the new telecarbon system is the larger or the wider Namifolo National Park landscape, excluding the coast zone. And then the system D is the new telecarbon system, which includes 2 neighboring countries, China and Vietnam. Next. So could you please go next again? Next. So for this study, we selected 3 villages in 3 districts. So the 3 districts that we selected are like most of the national park areas are located in these 3 districts. And the national park, some areas of the national park is actually bordering with Vietnam, and the location of the national park is also not very far from China. So that's why we see a lot of influences from these countries. Next, please. So for the research, we applied qualitative methods such as village meeting. We conducted a village meeting first, and then we also organized focus group discussions, and we went deeper with the semi-structure interviews. So the data that we collected, we analyzed using the MaxQDA software with content and thematic analysis approach. Next, please. So these are the preliminary results. Next, please. So between system A and the system B, so mainly the flows are the flows of funding for conservation and development activities, but it also includes like flows of knowledge in the form of deployment of experts, and also capacity building and trainings. And also there is the provision of equipment and influences on the policies and discourses in Laos BDS. For conservation. As the feedback we see as the status of biodiversity declining, and then there are also threats to the biodiversity conservation in the national park, and what are the gaps which are existing in resource and capacities of the local governance organizations, and then also the livelihood and land use activities of the communities. Next, please. So from the sending system A to the spillover system, basically, like there are a lot of provision of village development funds to stimulate rural development, and also there are programs for the revolving loans and the introduction of the alternative livelihood opportunities or activities in the villages, and also the land use planning, which is conducted together with the government agencies. As the feedback, we see the information about economic and socio-economic status of the villagers, and also there are a lot of requests for livelihood opportunities from the communities to the organizations, and also about the land users and livelihoods. Next, please. So from the receiving system, which is Namifolo National Park and its governance structure, and the spillover system is basically the land use planning, which aims to limit the area for shifting cultivation, and also to promote agricultural intensification in the villages. And since 2020, there's a new national park management plan, and in that plan, the national park, they want to create village conservation agreement with the villages which are inside the control use zone of the national park. And there are also feedbacks such as encroachment into the core zones of the national park. The hunting is still persist, and a lot of NDRP collections going on. And also there are complaints that the livelihoods are limited, so requests for more livelihood opportunity from the communities. Next, please. So between the emergent new telecarbon system and the spillover, here it will be the receiving system. For mainly the flows and the feedbacks are for the cash crops such as maize, cassava, and the jobs tier. So a lot of the cash crop companies, they provide seeds, fertilizers, and herbicide, and also they provide interest-free loans to the communities, to the villagers, and also they build roads. Sometimes the main roads are basically covered by the companies, but the feeder roads, which actually go to the cash crop cultivation areas, the cost has to be borne by the villagers. And also they provide trainees on how to grow the cash crops. And also there are these trade agreements between Vietnam and Laos, and also China and Laos as well. And the feedback is mainly about the information of potential villages or the area where the cash crops can be cultivated, and the interested villagers who are willing to participate in growing cash crops. Next. Yeah. So the sending system, the original sending system and the receiving system, they are actually facilitating the flows between these emergent systems. Because like the village development funds and the loans which are provided by that are actually used to cultivate cash crops and also to invest in the cattle as well. And sometimes the development projects and the programs, they also provide like high-fas to the poorer household so that they have additional income. And also like there are provision of seeds for grass in the pastures. And there are trainee program as well to provide knowledge for breeding techniques. And from the receiving system, basically between the cash crop companies and the villagers, it's facilitated by the local government organizations, and also the government organizations, they provide information to the cash crop companies, like where are the potential villagers to grow cash crop. Yeah, next please. I think there's another, yeah. So as the effects, we see mainly there's more and more demand for land because the land is already limited by creation of the national park, plus the boom in the cash crops create more demand for land. And as a result, there are a lot of expansion of cash crop areas, not only in the buffer zone, but also in the total protection zone. Like for example, in the top left picture, you can see the cattle actually is in the middle of the national park, the core zone. So there are also encroachments in the core zone. Because, you know, the cash crop cultivation areas are basically like very much intensified. And there are also a lot of uses of the herbicides to reduce reliance on manual labor. So as a result, there are a lot of land degradation as well. Okay. Next. So yeah, we applied the telecoupling as a heuristic construct to understand these dynamics. And also, we saw that the conservation and development telecouplings generate new telecoupled flows. And yes, of course, there are a lot of issues, but some issues like cattle and shifting cultivation could also be potential opportunities if we can integrate the two systems in some sort of sustainable way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Achan. We have time for 1 or 2 questions. No questions at this point. All right. Thank you very much. Then we would continue with our second speaker. Welcome, Ziva.
So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Zähringer Titoine. I'm a Malagasy half researcher, half practitioner, let's say that. I would like to thank the session organizer to allow us to present what we have done and what we are doing in terms of transformative action in the buffer zone of one of the largest national park of Madagascar. So we work in a remote valley of Madagascar, located in the northeastern part of Madagascar, and the valley bordered the national park of Maswal, and one village is even within a forest corridor between Maswala National Park and another natural park, which is Makira. And also it's a complex socio-ecological system where different challenges exist. Despite the rich biodiversity and also the ecosystem services that the global community benefit from the protected area, there is sort of injustice that we observed because the well-being of the local communities is not fulfilled. No infrastructure for accessibility, rice production are not sufficient for the family for the year. There is a cash crop production, but due to the unstable price, it leads to not enough cash for the families. So facing this challenge, we implement in our intervention following a systemic perspective that we, as partner of Swiss Academy for Nature, call the solution-scape approach. This approach is composed by 5 main components. It is a living lab where first there are coalitions for change, and then with these coalitions for change we establish a shared vision and strategy, and we have also a component of research where we share, and also we are trying to understand the dynamics within the system, and obviously we should have a monitoring, evaluation and learning component. And the heart of this approach is really the solutions that we are trying to test and experiment within the system. So what are the transformative action that we are doing within the valley? First, we are trying to engage with the stakeholders from the local to the national level, and the one principle that we adopt is really the co-design process. At each level of our implementation activities, we involve the concerned stakeholder, not only during the gathering and data collection, but really in every step of the implementation, from the designing, from the visioning process to the implementation process. Why this? Because we assume that when we won't be there, these stakeholders would take up the torch and conduct and implement this activity, and we are trying to empower these stakeholders if there is a lack. For example, if there is a lack of capacity, we are trying to support them by building capacity, and also we are empowering them, like I said, to be independent. And one activity that we are currently doing is digital accessibility, because, like I said, there is no infrastructure like roads. It is really a remote area, and it is only practicable only by walking or by motorcycle. And during the previous research that we did, we observed that the local communities are really eager to communicate, to exchange with the external partners, to exchange with the world outside of the valley. So we are trying to open our valley digitally by implementing and collaborating with the local communities for its management. We are implementing these community centers, electrified and with internet within these community centers, and we are doing sessions of digital literacy with mostly illiterate people, and also we are providing them services of how to do research on the internet and how to look for information that could be used for their livelihood activities. Apart from that, we also implementing and we are working with business and private actors with these activities on nature-based value chain, because the region where we work is, let's say, agroforestry dominate also the landscape, and there are a lot of products that could be valorized within this landscape, and we are developing restoration activities through agroforestry system, restoration of the shifting cultivation plot, and so on. And through these restoration activities, we also valorize the local endemic products that the local communities are producing, for example, silk and the vegetal fiber. And from that, we work with the local artisans and also with local, let's say, entrepreneurs, but really at the village and level. And within this activity also, if another farmer is adopting a sustainable or innovative practice that was undertaken by one of our collaborators, we are also supporting them. And one of the root cause of challenges of the challenges we also see is really the land access for youth, especially for youth. And here within these activities, within this sub-project, we are implementing local regulation, exploring customary and traditional right to benefit the land access for young people. So, in brief, what we have seen so far during the 4 years of working within the buffer zone of Maswal, these 5 ingredients are really important. Really, from the research part is the shared understanding of the system, but not only the scientific part, but really also consider the local knowledge that happened during the generation before. And also it is important to have a shared vision with these local communities, but based on the evidence that we get from the understanding of the system. And also one thing important is this engagement and iterative interaction with the stakeholders. And like I said, we are trying to address the root cause of the challenges with the solutions that we are implementing. And lastly, we have to align the solutions that we are implementing with the existing policies. And I think the last one is what we are trying to do now currently with our national stakeholder platform in Madagascar. And for that, I would like to thank all my team in Madagascar and all the involved people with this project. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Ziva, is there any question for Ziva? Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Ziva, for this interesting presentation. My name is Axel. I'm a geographer, and I am doing research or in a team about a reserve, a protected area in Brazil. And one challenge there is this rupture in the identity between generations, so that older people or adults have more identity with the place, and they are more engaged in preserving and in conducting activities that are more sustainable, whereas younger generations who have access to the internet, I mean, they see other life worlds, they want another consumption maybe than the other generation. How much is this a challenge locally, that young people might leave there's an exodus of young people. Do you see this?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. For our case, there are some young people who did their studies, the university studies, but come back to the village and are and also trying to follow the tradition passed by the elders and so on. And we observe that it is still rooted in them, this tradition of agriculture, but also using the land, even protecting the land. But the challenge we see is really that they don't have opportunities in the urban area, and they don't have opportunities in the rural area, and that is the tricky that is the tricky situation, and that's what we would like to address really on the land governance, but also on the livelihood to domain. I hope it answered. We could discuss further.
Thank you. I'm afraid we have to move on. So, welcome to our next speaker, Isabel.
Okay, thank you so much for being here. I'm Isabel Ramirez. I'm from the Research Center for Environmental Geography at the National Autonomous University of Mexico in Morelia's campus, and I'm going to talk in behalf of my colleagues about the community model of avocado production in the Monarch Butterfly Biosphere Reserve in Mexico. Sorry. Okay, the avocado is a commodity crop that has been increasing its global demand for the last 2 decades. It is produced in more than 70 countries around the world, and it has reached in 2021 a gross production value of more than $9,000 million, which makes it a very attractive financial product. Mexico is the world's largest producer. It covers 28% of the global production according to FAO. And within Mexico, Michoacán is the largest producer, covering 73% of the national production. And Michoacán is in central western part of Mexico. And look that in the recent years, also their neighboring states are increasingly introducing and expanding this crop. The avocado agro industry in Michoacán causes severe environmental and social impacts, but the scientific evidence on its sustainability has missed the diversity of practices and forms of production, and it mainly The studies mainly describe 2 types of production: the organic and the conventional. Well, I don't know, I won't explain them. And in Mexico, 97% of the avocado production qualified as conventional and only 3% as organic. Despite many farmers are interested in move into an organic production, they face multiple challenges to enter and remain in the organic certification sector, mainly because it takes longer periods of time to start producing and longer periods to recover their investments, and mostly they are small farmers that don't have the capacity the economic capacity to wait for this time, for this periods of time. Also, the expansion of avocado in the territories of protected areas in Mexico has been recognized by the federal environmental authorities as a sustainability problem. So in a recent diagnostic, it was on last year, the diagnostic resulted that the production in the protected areas is not sustainable. And they presented an action plan composed by 5 activities. 2 of them are already in place, and 3 new activities. And our work informed about these 3, about the sustainability models and good practices, about possibilities for organic certification, and to produce, to have local businesses, both for conservation and for sustainable production. Okay. The avocado in Michoacán is produced in 24 municipalities in central and western Michoacán, and in 5 municipalities in the eastern part of the state. These municipalities are the largest avocado producing region in the world, and this is known as the avocado belt. Michoacán avocado belt is located within the Trans-Mexican Volcanic Belt, a region that provides the optimal biophysical and climatic conditions to grow also temperate forests. The municipalities of Eastern Michoacán are also known for hosting one of the most beautiful hibernating phenomena in the world, the hibernation phenomenon of the monarch butterflies, that share the very same microclimatic conditions than the forest. Not exactly the avocados, but the forest. Well, in the protected area of that we are working in, millions and millions of butterflies overwinter every season on firs and some other conifers. To protect this phenomena, in 2000, the Monarch Butterfly Biosphere Reserve was issued. It covers more than 55,000 hectares, and around the reserve there were avocado plantations since the 70s, but they have been increasing considerable, particularly after 2010, because of an increase in the avocado demand mainly from the United States and other parts of the world. It's important to note that most of the expansion of avocado, despite it's around the reserve, it's mainly because of intensification of agricultural land use, and in less extent be caused by forest land change. So what you can see within the buffer zone, there are plantations that were already maize and other crops within the reserve. Thus, the objectives of our work were to characterize economic, social, and environmentally the community avocado production model and to assess the sustainability of this model of production. We use a theoretical and methodological framework of the MESNIS, which means a framework for assessing the sustainability of natural resource management systems, which 6 steps. First, characterize, then measure, and then synthesize. Oh, really? Why? Why time? Well, we work in 5 indigenous communities in this reserve. And identify a community model composed by 2 submodels. One submodel that has an organic affinity and a conventional model. We identify this because the use of fertilizers, the kind of fertilizers, organic or synthetic, the water, if they need energy to irrigate, and the workforce. So, very synthetic, I'm going to present this very complex model. So what I have to highlight about the avocado subsystem, the avocado production model, is it shares land with other subsystems, the livestock, fruit, and milpa subsystems, plus a forest subsystem. And the avocado, despite the threat that represents to the forest subsystem, all the communities that we work with recognize the importance to keep the forest, to keep the water, to keep the avocado production. So this also delivers money for strengthen some activities that create stronger community institutions, which include forest and water committees that in turn conserve the forest subsystem. So they are the avocado production is somehow financing, the many activities, and also financing the forest subsystem. The final step of the method is presenting the results in this amoeba graph, which compares the 2 submodels, and we identify 11 critical indicators, ecological, economical, and social indicators, and we can see that in most of the indicators, both submodels qualify relatively well, from acceptable to excellent. So the organic affinity model qualified better in having small parcels with more agroecological. With more agroecological practices and less dependence on irrigation. And the conventional model qualifies much better in the economical in economical benefits, both at generally and at family level. But what it's the characteristics of the general model is that both models have qualified excellent in avoiding forest loss and in having all the workforce with local community people. And that's all. So it has what I want to highlight here, that is to highlight that not all the avocado produced in Michoacán is the result of violence and deforestation. And thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm afraid we have to move on to the next, as we still have 3 presentations in this session. So, a warm welcome. Yes, I think it's you, Jovanka.
Well, I will start by explaining that I will present the results from our second study area. So we worked in the same project that Isabel just mentioned at the end, but I will talk about the local livestock system. Can you please give me the... Okay. So the big livestock system, as we all know, is related to many problems, which are related principally to the negative environmental impact that this production causes, but also low efficiency, in particular in the way of the land area is used or the other resources, but it's also highly vulnerable to the climate change that are results of these processes. On the other side, these systems are also presented as a solution if they are performed in a sustainable manner, such as through the establishment, for example, of the silvopastoral systems that can be both traditional or improved. And we consider that it's very important to investigate actually this kind of silvopastoral systems, local agroforestry systems, because the livestock breeding will continue because it's an important part of tradition, culture, landscape of many local people, and it's also important on the national scale for the national economy, and Mexico is also very high on the scale in the production of beef meat. Our study area is in southern Mexico, in Yucatan Peninsula, and it's part of the biosphere, Calakmul Biosphere Reserve. One part is the buffer zone, but most of our study area, municipality of Copelchen, is actually transition zone, and it's predominantly inhabited by Maya indigenous people organized in ejidos, which is the collective property type in Mexico, and they perform agriculture, both type of agriculture, and they are the principal livestock breeder for meat. But we also there have the minority of Mennonites migrants that came from northern Mexico. They live from mechanized agriculture principally, and their livestock is focused on milk production. This area, the region of Peninsula, is well-known hotspot for deforestation, but as you can see, our study area is also one of the hotspots for the deforestation for soy production since the 80s with the agro-industrialization. And not only deforestation occurred with this process, but also the abandonment of traditional practices and territorial reconfiguration through sales and rents of the land. Principally to, as I said, to this group, to this ethnical group, and this process is supported by the policies. Like, for example, here they say that the Campeche, the state where this municipality is located, can be a new granary of the Mexico, and that's how everything started. But when we talk about the deforestation for the livestock, we can see also that our study area is one of the points where the most of the tons of beef meat is produced also in this region, and the red spots are deforestation. And this process was also supported by the federal policies, although the biophysical and climatic conditions are not as favorable. Our results of the spatial analysis show that these two activities occur in a different part of the study area. We can see that the northern part is mostly occupied by the agriculture, mechanized agriculture principally, and that's the dominant land use. And the pasture occurs principally in the southern part, and that's where we focus our evaluation. And the main processes are deforestation from secondary forests to pasture, and then deforestation to dense forest. Here I only refer to pasture. And then also some pasture was reconverted to mechanized agriculture, another way around from traditional agriculture to pasture. So the same method was used, the MESMIS, and the objective was to evaluate the sustainability of the local big livestock production. The first step was to recognize the two subsystems to be able to evaluate the sustainability in a relative, not absolute manner. So we look at the different silvopastoral systems, such as forest strips that were found in the area, live fences, scattered trees, forest fragments, and alley grazing. And if the producer had more than 5 of these elements and use it for fodder, we identify this group as alternative and the conventional or the rest. So the results, the same as Isabel said, the comparison between two groups. So here we had the 16 indicators from 3 different spheres. And these are the indicators in which alternative model does better. Those are principally from the environmental sphere, principally the forest area on the ejido level, then the rest period from occupation of pasture lots, then burning frequency, which has to do with forest degradation, and then they use more family force. They do not depend on the external force to perform their activities. So these are the excellent or acceptable values that we found. The alternative does better. The conventional does better also in 2 environmental, which is the water availability. This is related to that these producers established their farms like they have longer their farms, so they have many sources of water. They also have a good stocking rate of their pasture. They are really well in a natality rate. They have more calves born every year, and a very low mortality. And also they combine their income with the other income from livestock with the other agricultural incomes, which gives them the stability. If we talk about the indicators that we can consider as equally, that they equally perform by both groups, this is the pasture availability, but the strategies actually were different. The ones that have more silvopastoral systems, silvopastoral elements, rely on the fodder from those elements, and the others rely on more area of pasture. But they can provide the pasture over the year for their animals. And the economic returns, we can see here that the conventional is maybe a little bit better, but they both score excellent. These are the indicators that both models did very bad. The worst is the organization, because they sell on the individual base. They cannot negotiate better prices with the local buyers, and that's the common problem for both groups. They also have very few pasture species. Their forest area, this was surprising, that forest area was, the forest area was also very low, deficient in both cases on the farm level. And they also do not have other incomes other from agricultural or other productive activities, incomes that would also provide stability to their economy. So the final remarks or the conclusions are that the alternative system, as we saw, it's economically viable, which was the most important for the local producers to continue implementing or to switch to this kind of production, but not only that is viable alternative to the conventional model, and it does better in some environmental, in social indicators, but it also an alternative to agricultural mechanization that we see that is the main land use in this area, that also includes the transfer of land control to the other farmers. So we consider that are agents of the agro-industrialization model in the area. So we consider also that according to the perception of the producers, the price of the calves is more stable over the year than of the other products, and also they see it as less vulnerable than to climate change than the agriculture, and it's a source of protein to their families. We saw also that the silvopastoral elements are not present in the required density. So there are some silvopastoral elements, but we cannot actually talk about silvopastoral systems. And so this should be improved, and that should be supported by the policies. And these elements are also mainly used as a protection or as as an infrastructure, such as wood material to make this kind of infrastructure, and less as a fodder. So this should also be supported by the policy. And thank you very much for your attention and for the
Thank you, Jovanka. Any questions? Yes.
Thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. I just have a simple question. So the households, they do both the agriculture and the cattle, or just choose one of them?
They usually combine.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And the typical size of the hut, like how many cattle do a typical household own, and what are the maxima like a household usually own? The size of the hut. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that the average size was around 30 cattle, but there are also some extreme values like. But in the general, in our sample, they were all on that size of we can consider it medium for that region.
And they are all like free grazing, right? They don't harvest the grass and then feed to the cattle.
Yes, and there were some of the practices that we took into account to group them, because some of them have some area of pasture that can be stored, cut and stored and brought to their cattle. So this is one of the practices that some of them have, but it's not generalized. That's why it's alternative and not conventional. Conventional, is like a free range on pasture that was established by deforestation and
Thank you.
large areas.
All right, then I'd say we move on. Thanks again to our second last speaker, Dembele.
Hello everyone, my name is Famusa Dembele. I'm from Ghana. I'm a PhD student in Ghana. So this is the title of my presentation. It's Towards an Understanding of Land Use, Land Cover Transformation and CO2 Emission Analysis from the Bobri Forest Reserve and its surrounding area. So these are, thank you. This is the outline of the presentation. And to begin with, Ghana is located in West Africa. The country has over 260 forest reserves spanning on 2.5 million hectares. And the country also has about 6 different ecological zones, which each ecological having its own specific vegetation type. This is particularly from the rainforest, the transition zone, and the Guinea savanna, Sudan savanna vegetation type, and the semi-deciduous forest zone. Now, forests play a critical role when it comes to storing and sink of carbon, and it's also a critical reserve when it comes to carbon cycle. So in Ghana, there is a huge challenge of these forests because there is deforestation as a result of increasing population, agricultural expansion, and also illegal mining. So from the National EPA, Environmental Protection Agent, they estimated that the Afolu sector is the main contributor of greenhouse gases, with carbon dioxide being the most dominant. However, this estimation is based on the IPCC Tier 1 approach, which is just an estimate. So one of the aim of this research is to provide some baseline data on greenhouse gas emission in the country. The selection of the study area is basically because of its rich biodiversity area with over 400 butterfly species. However, as a result of deforestation, there is a huge decline in these species in the area. And also, the area have a lot of different kind of animals and also amphibians. So deforestation is really affecting the biodiversity in the study area. So the research tried to answer 2 main questions. First, how has land use, land cover transformation occurred from 1986 to 2022? And also, how does CO2 emission vary across different land use type and the seasonal variation of CO2 emission across the various land use type. So, as I already mentioned, the study area is located in Ghana. So this is the legal boundary of the forest reserve, Bobri. So we created a boundary buffer zone of 10-kilometer radius from the reserve. And for the second, the same research question. So to answer this question, we downloaded satellite image from USGS for 3 years, 1986, 2007, and 2022. So the various images were classified, accuracy assessments were performed before proceeding with change detection. Now, for the second research question, which is related to CO2 emission across land use type. So we established plots based on the results from the classification. We had 4 different land classes: closed forest, open forest, cropland. So for cropland, we decided to focus on 2 major crops grown in the area, which is rice and maize. So for each of these land use types, we selected 2 topography under canopy, like upland area and lowland area. So for each topography, we had 2 plots. And each plot had 2 main habitats, whereby we install 3 experimental units called collars. Just as a pictorial illustration, this is actually the experimental unit which was installed on each plot. And here is the collar. So this collar was installed on each of the habitat types. So you remember I said 2 habitat types per plot. So in the forest, for instance, we focus on 2 habitats where there is under canopy. Under canopy means there is no direct sunlight reaching the forest floor, and intercanopy or canopy gap where there is light reaching the forest floor. Now, the first preliminary results we got from the satellite image, as you can see from 1986, the closed forest cover was really amazing, but with time there have been a serious depletion of the closed forest area and isolating the closed forest, the protected area, which is this dark green. And with time, again, it has been depleted over time. So this is showing how deforestation is really affecting the protected area by exposing it to a lot of climatic hazard. And it's estimated that in the future, the number of butterfly species is going to really decrease. Although deforestation is not occurring within the premise of the reserve, but as it stands at now, there is no other kind of vegetation around or closed forest which will actually call for emergency, because if there is no vegetation around, they are likely to penetrate inside the reserve, which is going to be really like horrible. Now, for the second research question, the CO2 emission across different land use type. Basically, the result is showing that over the 12-month period, well, we collected the data for 13 months with 2 weeks interval from for the 13 months, and at every 2 weeks we are collecting the CO2 emission. And the result is showing that fallow land, which seem to record the highest emission, and the forests being the lowest. And the explanation to that could be in the fallow age were basically from 7 to 15 years, meaning from these years there was no cultivation there was actually no cropping, no activities were done on this land. So the area has become an organic flash material, providing a lot of organic material for microbes to feed on. And one will also agree the same thing is happening in the forest, because there is a lot of litter falling on the forest area. However, the decomposition rate in the forest is much more slower than on the fallow lands, because fallow is much more exposed to sunlight, and the organic material in the fallow area are less, they don't contain much lignin, which makes the breakdown of this organic material faster in the fallow compared to the forest, where the litter contains much more lignin and make it difficult to decompose by the microbes. And the seasonal variation here, this is an interesting graph because it's showing there is actually a variation in the CO2 emission across various months. However, the result is kind of contradicting literature from the temperate and subtropical areas, whereby they, in those literatures, they actually link increasing CO2 emission with temperature, soil temperature, which is the red line. However, in the tropical areas, like the soil moisture and soil temperature, they are really important, but particularly soil moisture, because soil temperature in the tropics doesn't really vary much. Meaning the focus should be really on the soil moisture. And also, we don't know, or there is little information known about how, or at which threshold variation in soil moisture will lead to increasing CO2 emission. So future studies should try to estimate how, at which threshold this increase will lead to CO2 emission. Additionally, the data that we collected were from closed chambers, dark, so meaning there was no sunlight reaching to the color inside, meaning there was no photosynthesis. So this data represents the emission, not the sequestration of the CO2. So future studies should also try to have, for instance, a transparent chamber whereby there is inlight sun coming to the the color, and there is photosynthesis, meaning there is sequestration of carbon, so that you will know at the contribution of each ecosystem when it comes to emission or sequestration of carbon. Just to conclude, the results show that the buffer zone of the protected area has been depleting over the past 36 years at a rate of 0.6%, which is really dangerous and call for urgent need for protecting this area to prevent the protected area from exposure to climatic hazard. And the results also show that land use change is an important driver of CO2 emission, with fallow lands, fallow crops emitting more CO2 compared to the forest. And also seasonality is an important factor to take into account, and especially try to know at which threshold change in these factors lead to increasing CO2 emission. Some few references. I would like at this point to thank the GLP to allow me to participate to this conference, and also the German Ministry of Research, which supported provided financial support for this work, and all the collaborators who contributed to this work. And as you see, there have been a lot of questions which need to answer. So in case someone is interested to collaborate, we are really welcome, and we welcome you to work with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Famusa. Any questions? Yes.
Thank you very much. Super cool study. I have a student in Kumasi, so I've been a couple of times there, and I have a question. When you showed the land cover change trends, there is a red area that it's labeled like non-vegetation that seems to, if you can put it, seems to grow from previously changed to cropland mixed vegetation. So what is that actually, like pasture for extensive cows?
The non-vegetated area?
Yeah.
No, basically there are areas where there is no vegetation, bare soil, settlements, basically.
Settlements?
Yeah, settlement and bare soil.
Okay, but then the settlements grew from 1986 to 2007 with that extent, like so big?
Yeah.
Oh,
actually.
interesting. Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your wonderful presentation. I am Priska Kwaku, and I'm a PhD student, human geographer at the University of Cambridge. So I have two questions. The first one is that you were saying that there's like 0.6% deforestation. Right?
Yeah, rate of deforestation.
Rate of deforestation. So I'm wondering what is the main drivers of this deforestation? And then the second question is related to your graph where you were showing different land use type and carbon emission. So I was quite surprised that fallow has like a highest amount of like carbon emission as compared to like rice or maize. Maybe it's a very naive question, so I'm wondering, because I was thinking the fallow will have much more vegetation, so much more carbon sequestration to like balance as compared to maize and rice that is mostly monocrop system. I guess in Côte d'Ivoire it's like this, so I guess in Ghana it might be similar, so yeah, thank you.
Okay, I would like to start from the last question. Basically, this is a very good question actually, and the result, as I mentioned at my last comment, these data are from the emission, so we couldn't factor in the sequestration or the contribution of vegetation on these areas. Because the chamber that we use, it's not transparent chamber, which doesn't capture the photosynthesis, meaning the amount of carbon being sequestered inside. So the result is, well, I don't know if it's a nice true, but it's the reality. And on the rice and maize field, these are basically as a result of agricultural practices. These, especially the maize rice fields, the farmers, they use a lot of chemical fertilizer, which means there is, in fact, we collected also nitrous oxide and methane data, but that one, we don't have the result yet. But the result is showing that methane is actually much more higher in the rice field compared to the CO2. So methane is the lead in terms of, like when you compare across land use type, methane recorded the highest. And fallow is the least in terms of methane emission. So basically, to answer your question, these are emission data, not sequestration, but future studies should look at the contribution of each ecosystem when it comes to sequestration. And for your...
I'm sorry, I'm very afraid I have to interrupt you, so we have enough time for our last presentation. But please exchange after the session. Thanks so much. All right.
Thank you very much.
And with that, welcome Gabriela.
Buenas tardes con todos. Esta sesión va a ser en español. Bueno, ahora vamos a presentar un caso práctico que está en Madre de Dios, sur del Perú. Madre de Dios, el siguiente. Madre de Dios es esto, es verde, es una región amazónica que está, como menciono, al sur. Y en esta región podemos encontrar récords mundiales de animales, de biodiversidad. También es llamada capital de la biodiversidad. Pero también dentro de Madre Dios existen zonas reservadas y parques nacionales. En esta tenemos a la Reserva Nacional Tambopata, que su extensión es aproximadamente de 274.000 hectáreas. Y la extensión de Madre de Dios son aproximadamente 85 millones de hectáreas. Entonces es una parte pequeña, siguiente por favor, de lo que es Madre de Dios. La Reserva Nacional está en la zona amarilla y la reserva siempre está acompañada de la zona de amortiguamiento, que es la que está anexa en el lado gris de la reserva. Siguiente. Hablando sobre la importancia de la zona de amortiguamiento, son espacios también que cubren una superficie de 235.000 hectáreas. Eso quiere decir que es aproximadamente el mismo tamaño que un poco menos el tamaño de la Reserva Nacional. Entonces, la dimensión y importancia que tiene la zona de amortiguamiento en este lugar prevalece sobre todo porque conserva y garantiza la conservación del área natural, que en este caso sería la Reserva Nacional Tambopata. Esta zona de amortiguamiento trata y promueve los desarrollos de actividades productivas, como ahí lo mencionan, ¿no? Como agroforestería, ecoturismo y otras afines que estén dentro de la zona. Esto para poder cuidar, en teoría, la Reserva Nacional. Lo que ahorita tenemos retos, que es sobre todo la minería ilegal, tala ilegal, tráfico de fauna, expansión agrícola no controlada, que son casos que han estado sucediendo dentro de la zona. Siguiente, por favor. Para ello, y para poder cuidar la Reserva Nacional y la zona de amortiguamiento, el gobierno tiene unos espacios de participación ciudadana que son denominados Comité de Gestión de la Zona de la Área Natural Protegida. En este caso en particular vamos a hablar sobre la Reserva Nacional Tambopata. Este comité nació en el 2001 a partir de la creación del área de la zona de la Reserva Nacional Tambopata. Entonces, parte del trabajo que tiene el comité, y para mencionar, el comité es un espacio civil donde integran academia, gobierno, ONGs, integran muchas organizaciones que ayudan a la gestión y el mantenimiento del área. Bueno, y una de sus misiones es fomentar la gobernanza, fortalecer la gestión efectiva del área natural, promover la sostenibilidad en la zona de amortiguamiento. Y ella también tiene unos instrumentos de gestión que estas ayudan a cuidar el área, que entre ellos está el plan maestro, que se renuevan cada 5 años, se actualiza cada 5 años, y está el plan estratégico de la zona de amortiguamiento, que es el PESA, y el plan de trabajo anual que tiene el comité de gestión. Aquí se puede ver un poco sobre los puntos verdes, donde están todos los sectores que representan todos los coordinadores que son miembros del comité de gestión. Entonces, el espacio de gestión que tiene el comité es inmenso. Y esa es una de las dificultades grandes que tiene el comité, porque es un espacio, como digo, voluntario civil que tiene esta organización. ¿Continuamos? Bueno, y entre las estrategias de intervención que tiene el comité, podemos hablar sobre la prevención y atención de conflictos ambientales, que eso es un tema bien complicado y difícil que tiene esta organización, porque en mi región, Madre de Dios, lamentablemente no hay autoridad política que pueda detener los retos y dificultades y crisis, y etcétera, que existe dentro de la zona de amortiguamiento, más la Reserva Nacional Tambopata. Se promueve la facilidad de diálogo, porque dentro de los sectores y los coordinadores del comité, la dificultad es el acceso a escucharlos, que es algo tan básico. Ellos, cuando les sucede algo, invaden sus zonas, cuando son amenazados, etcétera, y todo lo que mencioné antes, no tienen dónde acudir, porque la confianza, que es algo tan necesario dentro de un espacio de gobernanza, se ha perdido. Y el único lugar de gestión que tiene, o de confianza que tiene el espacio de la zona de amortiguamiento, es el comité. Entonces ellos tratan y facilitan este diálogo entre todos los sectores que están dentro de la zona de amortiguamiento, para poder facilitar la participación y acercarlos también a buscar justicia, ¿no?, para ellos. Entre ellos también está el diálogo de autoridades regionales, que eso es algo sumamente complicado al momento. El comité ha tenido mucho acercamiento ya desde el ministerio, porque regionalmente la autoridad es un poco complicada de llegar. Continuamos. Bueno, dentro de las estrategias también está la vigilancia y control. Ahí vemos lo desastroso que es una parte de la zona de amortiguamiento, que es una que está entre la pampa, que en un momento se creó el corredor minero, y ese es el resultado. Aquí en esta zona, dentro de las estrategias está el monitoreo de las actividades ilegales. Ellos tienen una forma de poder cuidarse entre los coordinadores del comité, y es tanta la confianza que dentro de ellos se puede comunicar cualquier delito que hay dentro de esta zona y pues el presidente, el vicepresidente son los que dan la cara por ellos, ¿no? En esto. Está la implementación y capacitación. El comité tiene tanta acogida también y gestión dentro del área que se han podido hacer facilitación a todos los coordinadores sobre celulares. Ahora están haciendo también capacitaciones para drones, para que ellos mismos puedan monitorear sus áreas. Y bueno, ahí seguimos con facilitación de acceso a comunicaciones. Hay muchos sectores que en la zona de amortiguamiento no hay ni internet, entonces el comité trata y gestiona poder instalarles antenas satelitales para al menos que ellos tengan contacto y puedan denunciar o puedan comunicar lo que les sucede dentro de su zona. Y quiero recalcar que el comité es una organización civil que no tendría que ocupar todas estas responsabilidades. Canalizan las denuncias. Uno de los temas complicados que tiene nuestro país es que todo está centralizado. Entonces, para canalizar denuncias, en unos años atrás tenías que ir a Lima y acudir a tu fiscalía especializada, en este caso ambiental, que es el FEMA, y poder hacer todo el proceso. El comité, mediante muchas denuncias que ha tenido, ha podido gestionar y pues descentralizar la Fiscalía Ambiental a la región. Sin embargo, actualmente el FEMA también es una institución que está corrupta, así que no hay confianza. Otra de las estrategias que ha tenido el comité, y gracias a todas las denuncias que tienen y ellos canalizan, se ha podido también descentralizar la oficina y la Fiscalía de Derechos Humanos. Eso ha ayudado mucho más porque la Fiscalía de Derechos Humanos tiene otro tipo de protocolos que ayuda a la gente que tiene pues afectaciones, invasiones, etcétera, a hacer denuncias anónimas. Y esto es la gestión del comité. Sigamos. Estos son algunos de los casos de asesinatos que tiene los defensores ambientales, que son miembros del comité. Desde 2015 se viene el caso de Alfredo Brasco. En ese entonces no se hablaba mucho de defensores ambientales y no se pudo seguir el caso. En el 2020, en plena pandemia, se reportó el asesinato de Roberto Carlos Pacheco. Él quiso solo defender su área, su concesión, y sin embargo los mineros ilegales pues lo mataron. Y eso es algo bastante fuerte que ha vivido el comité, porque él es el hijo también del vicepresidente que ahorita es del comité. En 2022, hace poco, también está Juan Julio Fernández, que también lo asesinaron solo por defender sus áreas. Continuemos. Y todo ello ha ayudado, de que los problemas y todas las denuncias, acciones y todas las cosas que tiene el comité ha ayudado a que puedan tener incidencia internacional. Ellos tienen, o nosotros el comité tenemos el contacto directo con las Naciones Unidas para poder denunciar estos actos y poder exponer también un poco o mucho al gobierno. Y esto da presión a que se puedan generar nuevas políticas de cuidado dentro del área. Continuamos. Bueno, para hablar de logros, ya estuve como mencionando algunos, que es el tema sobre todo de planes y gestiones que tiene el comité, y dentro del comité se ha podido gestionar algunos proyectos que sean apoyo a todos los miembros que están dentro de la zona de amortiguamiento, y ello también ayuda mucho a la participación a espacios de gobernanza, ¿no? Finalmente. Y dentro de Madre de Dios existen áreas de conservación, que son modelos que se pueden gestionar para poder buscarle otra alternativa sostenible dentro del área, de la región. Y bueno, acá vamos a resumir un poco. Después de todo este proceso que les cuento, se crearon desde el 2017 una estrategia para poder cuidar la zona de amortiguamiento, que es denominado el PESA. En ese entonces tenía el objetivo de conservar y recuperar los bosques en pie, promover actividades productivas y servicios sostenibles y mantener actividades existentes y sobre todo fortalecer el comité de gestión. Continuemos. Estos más o menos los planes que tiene el PESA. Ahí lo dejamos y continuamos. Esto es un poco sobre las amenazas que ya había mencionado un poco, sobre todo minería ilegal, deforestación, expansión agrícola no regulada, superposición de derechos de uso de tierra, que es algo que bastante se ve allá. Y las acciones prioritarias que tiene el comité es el fortalecimiento y sobre todo la implementación del PESA, que actualmente no se puede implementar porque hay dificultades con el gobierno. Entonces, el gobierno es el principal barrera que tiene la región para poder seguir continuando y buscando alternativas dentro de la zona. Y por último, ustedes me ven aquí, soy miembro del comité, soy coordinadora, y dentro de las estrategias que tiene el comité de gestión, porque es un comité de muchas personas agricultoras de campo, es buscar la sostenibilidad mediante la juventud. Entonces, se está buscando y formulando proyectos para que los jóvenes sean sus portadores de voces, líderes de la zona, y así como yo, estoy en un momento aquí también exponiendo y pudiendo buscar alternativas de solución a este caso bastante crudo y duro. Y pues involucrar a nuevos actores, ¿no? La misión del comité es buscar y ser un laboratorio vivo donde se pueda buscar la sostenibilidad de la zona, que es actualmente sumamente difícil y complicado, ¿no? Tuve aproximadamente como 10, el que ven ahí es mi papá, es el presidente del comité, y en todos mis 28 años he tenido aproximadamente como 10 a 12 garantías de vida, porque siempre las amenazas son constantes por solo cuidar lo que es de todos, un área y una zona tan bonita que es Madre de Dios. Gracias.
Muchas gracias, Gerenda. ¿Hay una pregunta? Uy, muchas.
En español. Gracias, Gerenda, muy interesante. Nos hablaste, queda claro la parte de resiliencia y queda claro el éxito que es tener el comité. ¿Podrías decirnos algunos casos, algunas acciones concretas que estas juventudes están haciendo justamente como casos de éxito para apuntar hacia la parte de la sostenibilidad?
Sí, como lo menciono, ese es un proceso que recién durante estos últimos años se está llevando el comité, porque ya nuestra junta directiva, que es el presidente y el vicepresidente, ya están mucho tiempo dirigiendo, y eso es algo que, bueno, personalmente también trabajo porque tengo un colectivo de activistas dentro de la zona, y una de las dificultades duras que tiene la región es el liderazgo de las juventudes. Entonces ahí también hay un análisis que tenemos que ver qué está pasando, porque los jóvenes no quieren, pero dentro de las iniciativas que tiene el comité es que en cada asamblea tengan que ir los hijos de los agricultores a las reuniones, porque al menos estén informados, ¿no? Ese es un paso que estamos pues dando, pero dentro de los proyectos que tiene el comité es crear una escuela de líderes, que eso está todavía en proceso.
Thanks so much. One last very short question.
Gracias por tu trabajo y por inspirarnos. Yo hice mi doctorado en Ucayali sobre deforestación, y cuando estaba haciéndolo estaba apenas surgiendo las FEMAs, y tú ahorita hablaste de las FEMAs también como una estructura donde se está generando corrupción, que me dejó pensando mucho. Y es un poco como este contraste, o sea, veo estos comités que tú mencionas como esa fuerza de la gobernanza de redes local, pero se necesita apoyo de los distintos niveles de gobierno para todo lo que es el enforcement, toda la parte legal. Entonces, ¿cuáles como las opciones? O sea, ¿cómo lo ven ustedes? La FEMA, que era como una opción en ese momento, veo que no es que esté funcionando muy bien. ¿Qué se está pensando en ese sentido y cómo lo ves tú? ¿Qué alternativas podrían haber y se podrían proponer? desde el punto de vista institucional.
Sí, realmente la corrupción nos invade a todos y dentro de mi región está bien complicado. Pero el comité tiene una fortaleza buena porque ha generado un espacio de confianza y actualmente han ganado un proyecto grande donde el comité tiene un asistente legal y un asistente técnico, donde cada denuncia que va del miembro de los sectores, cualquier sector en realidad, puede acercarse al comité y tener esta asistencia gratis, y ellos hacen acompañamiento, ya no con el FEMA, como mencioné, con la Fiscalía de Derechos Humanos directamente. Y otro de los aliados que tiene el comité es la Defensoría del Pueblo, que es solo es una interfaz para poder conectar y buscar otras alternativas, ¿no? Pero esas son las únicas formas o formas que tiene el comité dentro de la región. Pero actualmente también el comité tiene esta cercanía ya con ministerio, no con autoridad regional. Entonces el ministerio, desde el CERNAM, que es el Sistema de Áreas Naturales Protegidas, y el Ministerio del Ambiente, hacen este acercamiento para poder buscar soluciones. Pero son buscar soluciones. Actualmente aplicarlas está en proceso también. El caso de Roberto Carlos Pacheco, que mencioné, que fue asesinado en 2020, hasta ahorita sigue impune. Se encontraron los causantes, sí lo encontraron y siguieron todo el caso, pero la Fiscalía en Madre de Dios pues lo soltaron. Entonces ya es más enfocado en la región. Está difícil.
Thank you so much. Kerenda, unfortunately time is up. Thanks so much.
Gracias.
To all our speakers and the audience, I'm Zähringer from the Wyss Academy for Nature and University of Bern. If you want to know more about the Wyss Academy's activities across the world, then please visit our stand here in the lobby. We are happy to talk to you more. Thank you, all the best.